A 40-year-old goalkeeper just humiliated the reigning champions, dragging an unknown African island into the World Cup spotlight. But while he was stopping goals, the live broadcast broke down for a totally different reason. The cameras locked onto the stands, and social media lost its mind. The Cape Verdean women went violently viral. Viewers were utterly obsessed with a level of physical attraction that comes from a bizarre, hidden genetic secret nobody talks about. These fans literally stole the entire show. Within minutes, timelines across the globe were completely flooded with their faces. Millions were frantically searching to figure out how a tiny, forgotten island produced such a rare, almost unreal combination of features. It triggered a massive online frenzy, turning ordinary women in the crowd into global obsessions overnight. And yet, that's just the first secret of this place. Right now, 1,000 people are living and farming inside the smoking crater of an active volcano, sleeping on a ticking time bomb for one dark, unbelievable reason. Join us, and let's discover the tiny nation the world just found out existed. Let's go!
Number 13. Chá das Caldeiras. 1,000 people live inside an active volcano's mouth, and they have no plans to leave. Chá das Caldeiras sits inside the crater of Pico de Fogo, Cape Verde's tallest peak, at 2,829 meters, roughly 9 statues of liberty stacked on top of each other, straight up out of the Atlantic. In November 2014, the volcano erupted for 77 straight days, burying homes, farmland, and roads under black lava that reshaped the entire crater floor. The villagers rebuilt since the exact same spot, on the exact same ash. This wasn't Fogo's first tantrum. It has erupted around 12 recorded times since the year 1500, staying active almost without pause through the 1700s, a mountain with a documented habit of destroying the same village over and over. So why does anyone stay? Because the same fire that destroys also feeds the soil underneath it. Volcanic ash here is so mineral-rich that farmers grow grapevines directly out of the black earth, turning the harvest into a wine they proudly call the wine of fire. Houses are built from black basalt cut straight from old lava flows. Ovens are shared between families who lost everything more than once. Ask a local why they don't move somewhere safer, and the answer is almost always the same. This is home, and they don't know how to live anywhere else. Standing on the crater rim, you're looking at one of the only places on Earth where an entire community made peace with living inside a loaded gun. And this is far from the only impossible thing this country has pulled off.
Number 12. The Spain draw. The smallest team in the entire tournament walked away from one of football's most feared attacking sides without conceding a single loss to them. In their opening match of the 2026 World Cup, Cape Verde held Spain, a squad ranked among the very best national teams on the planet, to a scoreless draw, a result that made headlines across major international football outlets within hours. Cape Verde is among the smallest nations ever to qualify for a World Cup in history, the second smallest by land area on record, and among the least populated countries to ever field a full team on this global stage. A nation of roughly 500,000 people, with virtually no professional football infrastructure compared to its heavily funded opponents, simply refused to concede a single goal to one of the tournament's outright favorites for 90 straight minutes. The result immediately reframed how the rest of the tournament would be forced to view this team, no longer a guaranteed easy win to pad another country's group stage record, but a genuine defensive wall built by players who grew up scattered across a dozen different countries and continents. It raised an obvious question that had nothing to do with football at all. How does a country this small, this poor, and this dry produce a team like that? To understand it, you have to go back to the empty rock these islands started as, centuries before anyone kicked a ball on them.
Only 1% of people know the dark truth behind what we are about to show you next. If you want to be part of the few who actually know what's happening in the world, subscribe and leave a like right now. Done? Look at this.
Number 11. Cidade Velha.
The oldest European colonial town anywhere in the tropics still stands on this island, and its history refuses to stay quiet. Founded in 1462 on the island of Santiago, Ribeira Grande, now known as Cidade Velha, became one of the most important ports in the Atlantic world for more than a century, a town built almost by accident into a crossroads between three continents. Its church, begun in 1495, is among the oldest of its kind still standing anywhere on Earth. For much of the 1500s and 1600s, this small town sat at a brutal intersection of history, a major transit point in the transatlantic trade of enslaved people, its geography making it a hub for a chapter of history that deserves to be told plainly, with respect, and never turned into spectacle. One surviving monument, the old stone pillory that once stood at the center of the town square, is one of the few physical markers left of that era. Pirates raided the town so often that the capital was eventually abandoned for a location up the coast, Praia, which remains the capital today. In 2009, UNESCO named Cidade Velha a World Heritage Site, not as a celebration, but as a place the world formally agreed never to let fade from memory. Out of that same painful crossroads, something entirely new was quietly taking shape, a language and a culture that had never existed anywhere on Earth before. That culture would eventually produce the very sound this country is now known for around the world.
Number 10. Cachupa. One pot defines an entire nation's survival, and it's simmering on stoves across all 10 islands right now, at this exact moment. Cachupa is Cape Verde's national dish, a slow-cooked stew built from hominy corn, several different kinds of beans, and whatever protein a family happens to have on hand that week. Fish along the coast, meat when meat is available, all of it melted together over hours of low heat until the ingredients stop being separate things entirely. Locals speak of two versions almost like social classes. Cachupa rica, the rich one, loaded generously with sausage, bacon, and extra vegetables for families who can afford it that month. Cachupa pobre, the poor one, made from whatever was left in a nearly empty kitchen. Leftovers get fried up the next morning into cachupa guisada, the country's iconic breakfast dish, and the meal Cape Verdeans abroad cook first whenever they want to taste home again from thousands of miles away, no matter how many decades they've been gone. Here's the twist that surprises most first-time visitors. Around 90% of Cape Verde's food has to be shipped in from elsewhere, because only about 1/10 of the country's land can grow anything at all. So a plate of fresh seafood sitting on an island surrounded by literal ocean can end up costing roughly what it would in southern Europe. Paradise, it turns out, runs a tab. And just off these same shores, an entirely different kind of survival story hides inside a dead volcano.
Number 9. Pedra de Lume. There's a place in Cape Verde where you float without even trying, sitting inside the crater of a dead volcano. Pedra de Lume sits on the island of Sal, a series of man-made salt pans built directly into an extinct volcanic crater, marking one of the lowest points anywhere in the country, dropping below sea level in the mouth of a mountain that hasn't erupted in millennia. The water inside is roughly 27 times saltier than the open ocean, dense enough that visitors simply lie back on the surface and stay there without paddling, the exact same buoyant effect people travel to the Dead Sea to experience firsthand. Salt has been harvested from this crater since the 1800s, hauled out by hand and cart long before any machinery arrived. And for decades it stood as one of the island's main exports, shipped out across the reserve fish in West Africa and Brazil, long before refrigeration existed anywhere nearby. Walking down into the crater today feels like stepping onto a different planet entirely, white salt crusts glowing sharply against black volcanic rock, the sky reflected perfectly in still hypersaline pools carved into the crater floor over centuries.
It's one of the strangest natural swimming holes anywhere on Earth, and almost nobody outside Cape Verde has ever heard its name spoken aloud. But salt was never the island's biggest export in this country's history. People were, and nowhere is that truer than on the one island that actually looks green.
Number 8. Cova Crater and Vale do Paul. One island in Cape Verde turns the country's name into an actual physical truth, and it isn't the one tourists usually photograph. Santo Antão, the second largest island in the archipelago, is almost the exact opposite of the dry, dusty postcard beaches most visitors expect when they picture this country. Here, the land stands nearly on end. Sharp ridges, deep canyons, and valleys folded so steeply into the volcanic rock that a road seems physically impossible until you're standing on one. The classic hike begins at the rim of Cova, an old volcanic crater sitting more than 1,000 meters above sea level, where hikers sometimes stand entirely above the cloud line and look straight down into a bowl of solid, unbroken green far below. From there, a stone path, much of it hand-laid cobblestone, hammered directly into the cliff face generations ago, drops steeply down into Vale do Paul, widely considered the greenest valley in the entire country, thick with mango trees, banana plants, sugarcane stalks, and wild passion fruit vines climbing the slopes. After days spent walking through brown volcanic desert on the other islands, the color here practically looks fake, almost too saturated to be real. This is where the country's hopeful name finally comes true, but only if you know exactly where in the archipelago to climb for it. And just off this same green coastline, an entirely different kind of survival story plays out quietly every single night, on the sand, in the dark. One island in Cape Verde hosts one of the largest wildlife comebacks anywhere on the planet, and almost nobody outside the country is watching it happen. Boa Vista is the third most important nesting site on Earth for the loggerhead sea turtle, ranked behind only Oman and the southeastern United States. And it stands as the single most important nesting site in the entire eastern Atlantic Ocean, a fact most marine biologists know well, and almost no tourists do. For years, this was a story heading firmly in the wrong direction, with turtles hunted for their meat pushing local populations towards serious collapse decade after decade. Then a coordinated conservation effort quietly began. Night patrols walking the beaches in total darkness, specially trained detection dogs sniffing out buried nests, and drones scanning miles of sand to intercept poachers before a single egg could be touched. A recent study tracking just 3 beaches on Boa Vista found the number of nests rose roughly 80-fold over 27 years, an almost unheard-of recovery curve for any endangered species anywhere in the world. Poaching hasn't disappeared completely even now, and the growing crowds of tourists arriving each season put their own new pressure on these same fragile beaches. But somewhere along the way, this poor island nation quietly decided these animals were worth more alive in the sand than sold dead at a market stall. And that same protective instinct would soon shape an entire nation's music.
Number 6. Morna. UNESCO added an entire music genre to its list of humanity's cultural treasures in 2019, and it comes from an island most people alive today still can't find on a map. Morna is Cape Verde's signature musical style, a slow, aching, deeply melancholic sound built around a single feeling the Portuguese language could only ever have translate: saudade. A longing for someone or somewhere far away that never fully heals no matter how much time passes or how far the distance grows. The genre developed gradually over more than a century, blending Portuguese lyrical tradition with African rhythmic roots into something that ended up belonging to nobody but these 10 islands and the people scattered from them. Morna is rarely treated as background music here. It's performed as a form of serious storytelling, often sung at gatherings where the audience is expected to sit in near total silence, absorbing lyrics built around lost love, forced migration, and the specific ache of leaving home behind for good, sometimes forever. The genre's lyrics are almost always written in Crioulo, the country's Portuguese-based Creole language,
meaning the deepest emotional core of the music exists almost entirely outside the country's own official written language. For decades, Morna stayed largely unknown outside West Africa and Portugal, a local secret passed quietly between generations at family gatherings. Then one barefoot singer from the island of São Vicente took it, and this tiny nation's grief, onto a global stage nobody had ever expected it to reach.
Number 5. Cesaria Évora. She performed on the world's biggest stages without ever once wearing shoes, and turned an entire country's private sadness into a genuine global phenomenon. Cesaria Évora, known internationally as the Barefoot Diva, became the single most famous voice Cape Verde has ever produced, performing barefoot as a quiet, deliberate act of solidarity with the poor women back on her home island who simply couldn't afford shoes of their own. She won a Grammy Award in 2003, and her recording of the song Saudade carried that exact untranslatable ache to millions of listeners who had never once heard of Cape Verde and didn't need to understand a single word of Crioulo to feel exactly what she meant. Born in 1941 in Mindelo on the island of São Vicente, she spent decades singing in small local bars for modest crowds before international fame ever found her, only breaking through in her 40s after eventually relocating to Paris to record her first widely distributed albums. She died in 2011, but her legacy is now written permanently into the physical geography of the country itself. The main international airport on her home island now carries her name, meaning the very first thing many visitors read the moment they land in Cape Verde is the name of a woman whose most famous song in the world was about the pain of missing home. That paradox, the warmest people on earth building an entire national identity around the pain of leaving, is the exact key to understanding why this country's team meant so much more than football.
Number 4. The Cape Verdean Diaspora. There are more Cape Verdeans living outside Cape Verde than inside it, and that single fact is the real reason their World Cup run hit so hard for so many people watching from thousands of miles away. For every person living on the islands today, there are roughly 3 or 4 living abroad. Somewhere between 1 and 1.5 million people, counting their children and grandchildren scattered across continents. Through the 20th century, drought, hunger, and a lack of opportunity pushed wave after wave of islanders onto ships bound for other continents, most never able to move back home permanently, sending letters and money instead. The largest Cape Verdean community outside the islands settled in the United States, concentrated heavily in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, nearly 500,000 strong. The city of Brockton, Massachusetts, is sometimes nicknamed the 11th island, because Cape Verdean descendants make up close to 1/5 of the entire city's population, running restaurants, churches, and radio stations in Crioulo. These communities never stopped sending money home either. In 2025 alone, the Cape Verdean community in Portugal sent back a record $52 million, up more than half in a single year. So when this small nation's team finally stepped onto a World Cup pitch in 2026, it wasn't really 11 players representing 500,000 people at home. It was an entire scattered nation, gathered from 3 continents, standing on one field together.
Cape Verde's World Cup fans. 500,000 people at home, and well over 1 million more scattered across the entire planet, all somehow found each other again inside stadiums across the United States in the summer of 2026. When Cape Verde qualified for its first ever FIFA World Cup, the crowds filling the stands for their matches looked unlike almost any other team's support at the entire tournament. Blue and white flags mixed freely with the colors of Portugal, the Netherlands, and 6 other countries where Cape Verdean communities have lived and grown for generations. Entire diaspora communities flew in specifically from Massachusetts and Rhode Island, home to the largest Cape Verdean population anywhere outside the islands themselves, some booking flights the moment qualification was confirmed. The city of Brockton sent busloads of supporters south for the tournament, some driving over 1,000 miles just to be inside the stadium for one match. Fans sang loudly in Crioulo,
waved flags representing specific islands most of the crowd around them had genuinely never heard of before that day, and turned every single match into a reunion for a nation that mostly doesn't even live inside its own country anymore. For a team with no real history at this level of competition, that wall of noise became a genuine, measurable weapon on the pitch, something opposing coaches openly admitted to underestimating. And one man in particular turned that raw energy into something world football had never quite seen before.
A 40-year-old goalkeeper just became the single most unlikely hero of the entire 2026 World Cup. Josimar Diaz, known across Cape Verde simply as Vozinha, has made more than 90 appearances for the national team, over a career most players his age would already consider finished. And at an age when most professional goalkeepers have long since retired to coaching or television commentary, he stood alone in the net against one of the most feared attacking lineups in world football. His performance was commanding enough that he was named Player of the Match, a result almost nobody outside Cape Verde had seriously predicted before kickoff that day. Vozinha's career never followed anything close to a conventional path to this level, built largely outside Europe's wealthiest and most decorated leagues, which makes his sudden presence on this stage even more genuinely improbable to football analysts watching from abroad who had barely heard his name before the tournament began. Teammates and commentators alike have repeatedly pointed to his composure under pressure as the single steadying force behind a defense that had absolutely no business holding up against far wealthier, far more decorated opponents match after match. He is, in every practical sense, the underdog standing inside the underdog story, a 40-year-old refusing to let this tournament end quietly, and his defense would be tested one final time in the biggest match of the entire run.
Number 1. Argentina 3, Cape Verde 2. The reigning World Cup champions needed extra time just to survive the smallest team in the tournament's entire knockout stage, and it very nearly didn't happen at all. In the round of 32 on July 3, 2026, in Miami, Argentina beat Cape Verde 3-2, but only after Cape Verde forced the match into extra time, becoming the smallest nation by population ever to compete in a World Cup knockout match. Lionel Messi opened the scoring in the first half, calmly converting a long ball from defender Lisandro Martinez for his 20th career World Cup goal. Cape Verde answered almost immediately through Deroy Duarte, dragging the match level and sending it deep into a second-half battle neither side could fully control. Lisandro Martinez put Argentina back ahead early in extra time with a close-range finish, and Cape Verde responded again through substitute Sidney Cabral, tying the game a second time and pushing the reigning champions right to the edge of a penalty shootout against a team ranked 64th in the world. In the closing minutes of extra time, an own goal from Cape Verde's Bondine Borges finally settled the match, sparing Argentina from one of the greatest upsets in World Cup history by the narrowest possible margin. A country with no oil, almost no farmland, and more citizens living abroad than at home had just taken the reigning world champions to the absolute brink of elimination and made sure nobody on Earth would ever again have to ask where Cape Verde actually is.
If you thought this was terrifying, you are not ready for what they found in the video on your screen. Click it right now. The truth is worse than you think.